There's never a good day for a supervillain attack or a tense feud with your closest sibling, and for the mighty Thor, this day was turning out to be both. As the self-proclaimed strongest Avenger flung his body across the planet Earth using his trusty magical hammer, Mjolnir, the Asgardian steeled himself for yet another confrontation with his evil half-brother, Loki, the god of mischief. As per usual, Loki was terrorizing the humans of a random city, using his illusions to manifest imaginary dragons and other ferocious beasts. And what was also usual is Thor had no idea what his brother's motive or endgame was. All the God of Thunder knew was that this kind of trickery-dickery would not be stood for. While these terrible creatures weren't real, they were still very frightening to the Earthlings. Civilians were running around in every direction away from Loki, and this was causing all kinds of chaos and traffic disturbances. Regardless of what Loki's plan was, Thor knew that his brother had to be stopped before things escalated further. On Earth, humans needed to rely on vehicles to get around, and even the slightest inconvenience in transportation could lead to disaster. Thor touched down in the same city square where Loki was unleashing his horde of make-believe monsters, landing in a classically cool superhero way. "Hello, brother," Thor proclaimed. "I don't suppose you'll be stopping this without a fight." Loki smiled a mischievous smile and replied,
"Ah, Thor, we meet again. And once again, you're wrong. I can stop this any time I want."
Loki swiftly moved his hand through the air, casting a new spell to dismiss his diabolical decoys. The illusions dispersed naturally, and soon the two brothers were facing each other one-on-one.
"See?"
Loki chuckled. Thor was rightly confused by his brother's unpredictable actions. He pointed Mjolnir towards Loki in an accusatory manner. "No illusions, no sorcery. What are you really playing at, Loki?" said Thor. And then Loki reached into his robes and produced an unusual cube-shaped object. As his good brother was all too aware, this particular cube was the latest in a long line of mysterious and powerful cubes that Loki had used for his various evil plans. Loki juggled the unknown cube from one hand to the other, then waved it in the air in front of Thor and began to laugh maniacally.
"All I need to do is open this ancient box of mysteries, and I'll become completely unstoppable."
"Don't you dare do it, Loki," Thor shouted. "That sort of power will be misused in your hands."
"That's precisely the point!"
Loki continued to laugh, then reached for what appeared to be the lid of the cube. He grabbed the top of it and made a show of beginning to twist. This sent Thor's heroic instincts into high gear, and he threw Mjolnir at the cube, knocking it out of Loki's grasp. As the cube flew away from the grinning villain, Thor dove to retrieve it before his brother had the chance. He soon held the strange item in one hand while calling Mjolnir back to the other. As Thor stared at the cube, pondering its purpose, Loki stretched out his hands in desperation.
"Oh, no, not my cube! If you open it now, my plan is doomed!"
Loki pleaded. Thor responded with a laugh of his own.
"Nice try, brother, but I'm going to open it."
And so the God of Thunder did. Thor popped the cube's lid and braced himself for whatever cosmic force was about to be released, but for some reason, nothing happened. Still curious, Thor took a cautious look inside. As it turned out, the only thing within this apparently non-magical cube was what appeared to be a fully developed photograph.
"What in Odin's name is this?"
Thor removed the image and held it close to his face. It appeared to depict an emaciated, pale humanoid with long, spindly limbs standing in the corner of a compact room with smooth metal walls. In all his many years traveling the 9 realms, Thor had never seen anything like it. Whatever the creature actually was, it certainly did not look happy. Of course, what Thor was actually looking at was a photo taken of SCP-096 inside of its containment unit at the Foundation. The Shy Guy, as its nickname suggested, did not like having its face looked at, even via secondary means, such as photography or video recording. The anomalous humanoid sense of shame about its own appearance was so great that a mere moment after Thor fixed his Asgardian eyes upon its visage, SCP-096 began to stir in its containment unit. The creature wailed and covered its face with both of its hands on its long, sinewy arms. It screamed and carried on for a duration of 2 minutes, after which point SCP-096 sprinted towards the steel walls of its containment unit and smashed through. Reaching speeds greater than most motor vehicles, SCP-096 began to zero in on Thor's location. As was always the case when another being saw its face, the Shy Guy was compelled to utterly annihilate the offending observer with its bare hands. Thor himself had no idea that SCP-096 was en route and continued to squint at the photograph, perplexed by the mysterious entity depicted therein. Loki now resumed his mad laughter because once more, he had managed to trick his foolish brother into falling for one of his ingenious schemes.
Make sure to get a good look, brother,
Loki gloated.
Yes, look at the full creature. That will bring about your inevitable destruction.
Thor was annoyed.
If you think that showing me a gross picture of some lowly wretch will strike fear into my heart, you've truly forgotten what it means to be an Asgardian.
Save your sentiments for the halls of Valhalla,
the green-clad evildoer cackled.
You'll be there soon enough.
And with that, Loki used a charm to turn himself invisible and vanish completely from Thor's sight. Thor stomped his foot on the ground angrily. He wasn't sure how, but it seemed as though Loki had gotten the last laugh once again.
Loki!
He shouted after his brother.
Come back here and face me with honor!
Then the god of thunder sighed pensively and thought to himself,
Who am I kidding? He's never going to change.
Thor looked at his trusty hammer.
Mjolnir, old friend, it seems like we've saved the day yet again. Shall we away back to Avengers HQ?
He then shook Mjolnir up and down like a puppeteer simulating a nod.
Splendid idea, Mjolnir. Glad you thought of it.
Thor chuckled, already in better spirits. That's when he began to hear the footsteps of SCP-096 rapidly approaching him. Thor turned his head towards the sound and saw the same disquieting creature from the photograph that was inside Loki's cube, zooming headlong towards him with reckless abandon. The Asgardian blinked. He almost couldn't believe his eyes. Whatever that thing was, it was faster than Thor could have possibly anticipated.
Was it looking for the photograph?
He wondered.
Hello there!
Thor called out as SCP-096 continued to make a beeline at the caped superhero. The god of thunder waved the photograph of SCP-096 in the air.
Is this your, selfie?
In all likelihood, Loki had been his usual conniving self and stole that self-portrait from the miserable creature, hoping that it would mistake Thor for the thief. The god of mischief had probably even used a glamour to disguise himself as Thor when he did the deed. Thor believed that all he had to do was clear up this misunderstanding, and that he and this strange beast could go their separate ways without coming to blows. It was a naive, optimistic, and ultimately incorrect view of the situation, but at least the hero's heart was in the right place.
I don't need this, so...
Thor said, trying to reason with the creature.
You can have it back if you'd like.
But SCP-096 showed no signs of stopping, and was seemingly enraged even further by Thor flaunting its decidedly unflattering photograph. The Shy Guy kicked the ground and shot forward with a powerful burst of speed. One of its elongated arms slammed into Thor's face with enough force to nearly knock the Asgardian off his feet. Thor was so surprised that he instinctively whacked the creature with Mjolnir, sending SCP-096 careening backwards down the street. It wasn't launched more than a dozen feet before its powerful arms and legs dug into the pavement and slowed its velocity to 0. Even though the thing from the photo had taken a direct hit from Mjolnir, it barely looked phased on a physical level. One thing was for sure, the Shy Guy was still incredibly distraught, and it was directing all of those negative emotions towards the god of thunder.
What was this thing? What is this thing?
Thor wondered to himself. It was fast, strong, and durable to an unearthly degree. If this thing wanted to engage in single combat, Thor wouldn't back down. He was an Asgardian warrior, and sometimes that meant facing challenges head-on, no matter how suddenly they arose. Still, his time with the Avengers had taught him that having a clear reason to fight was sometimes even more important than the fight itself.
Hey, quick question. What are you?
He said aloud to the creature. SCP-096 didn't answer. Within seconds, it was on Thor again like a bilge snipe on another bilge snipe. The screaming humanoid swung wildly, pelting its opponent with blow after blow. Thor tried once more to communicate with his unknown enemy.
I have no quarrel with you, Weird One,
Thor spoke.
So take your noodle arms and be gone.
For all of its relentless ferocity, the humanoid abomination left countless openings that a seasoned warrior like Thor could easily exploit. Of course, most mortal combatants would be unable to endure the brunt of the Shy Guy's attacks for long enough, but true to his nature, Thor was a god. The Avengers struck back with another crushing blow from Mjolnir, aimed straight for the creature's sternum. Once again, the monster was pushed back for a moment, and then resumed its maddening onslaught.
A blow like that should have at least busted a rib or two. Were the bones of this horrible thing made of vibranium or some other rare metal out of the depths of space?
Thor realized he was now fighting on the defensive. While he had faced foes in the past with much greater physical strength than the Shy Guy, including his superhero colleague Bruce Banner's mean, green, ever-loving alter ego, the Incredible Hulk, the sheer tenacity of SCP-096 meant that being careless with his own protection could lead to Thor taking unnecessary hits that would eventually wear him down in a prolonged fight. The wiry humanoid certainly didn't show any signs of slowing down or tiring, even though it had to be expending a lot of energy to move so quickly. Between his alternating deflections and counterblows against the creature, Thor mulled over his brother's words from earlier.
Loki was right about one thing. This is a fell creature if ever there was one. Still, as long as there is thunder in my blood, I won't allow a hairless cur like this to bring me my own destruction. Think, Thor. What would Stark do at a time like this? He says he's the smart one after all, humor him.
With his highly sophisticated tactical acumen that was similar to Iron Man except for the fact that it was much better and stronger, Thor efficiently assessed his current situation. While the pale beast was undoubtedly violent and far mightier than most terrestrial creatures, its attention and all the brute strength that came with it had been fixated solely on Thor since it arrived in the city. The Asgardian's best guess as to why was the photograph that Loki had tricked him into looking at. Devious trickster that he is, Loki must have known that this thing would hunt down and attempt to pulverize the latest being to see its face, which now, of course, happened to be Thor. The revelation of this fact meant that Thor no longer had to worry about the fate of civilians if he chose to relocate to a less populated battlefield, since the creature was now guaranteed to follow him. Nobody else needed to get hurt. While running from the fight wasn't exactly the God of Thunder's favorite strategy, it would massively reduce the chance of collateral damage. He'd be saving lives in classic Avengers fashion. Captain America would be so proud. Not that Thor would have done it any differently, even if he didn't have the Star-Spangled Man's approval. SCP-096 leaped in towards Thor to deliver its next walloping strike, but the Asgardian quickly grabbed it by the wrist and pulled the ferocious creature off its feet. He lifted it up and over his head before slamming it down hard into the pavement. With a bit of space between himself and his anomalous foe, Thor began to swing Mjolnir around by its leathery wrist strap. The Shy Guy desperately scrambled to its feet to resume the attack, but by that time, Thor had already thrown himself skyward. He soared between the buildings using the force of Mjolnir's trajectory, making it his mission to exit the city as soon as possible. Thor looked down to see that SCP-096 was following him along the ground, exactly as he predicted it would. While the battle with the beast would most certainly continue the second he dropped back to Earth's surface, he could rest assured that the place where the showdown would take place could be chosen by him. He saw an evergreen forest on a nearby mountain and decided that it would do nicely as a place to finish this.
I'm sure no one would mind a few stray bolts of lightning around here, Thor thought.
The God of Thunder was amused by the prospect of going all out against this being. Even though it probably had its reasons for wanting to destroy the one that saw its face, Thor was past the point of taking chances on diplomacy. This distressing creature was, after all, an adversary that Loki had plotted to send after him through one means or another, and because of that, it was likely to have power and guile to spare. Thor breaking a sweat to vanquish the thing would be a fitting replacement for the fight that he would have to have with Loki. Thor's feet hit the ground on a stony mountain ledge, and once again he struck that iconic superhero landing pose. Remarkably, the Shy Guy had kept pace with Thor almost the entire time the Asgardian had been flying, smashing through every tree and boulder that stood in its path. Even so, Thor was more than ready for it. Storm clouds rumbled overhead. The sky above the mountain was trembling as Thor decided that it was time to bring down the thunder on his unfortunate foe.
Boom! Crack!
The heavens flashed with electrical might as Thor channeled the energy from several lightning bolts through Mjolnir before unleashing a consolidated blast of unbridled power onto SCP-096. The Shy Guy didn't even attempt to dodge as Thor's Thundershock treatment bombarded it with light and heat, the likes of which few mortals could withstand. Thor released a second blast, then a third, surrounding SCP-096 with as much lightning as these earthly skies would offer him. After keeping at this for a while, Thor decided to let up momentarily to check in on his foe, only to see that there were no signs of visible damage on the creature. It wasn't even slightly singed. The God of Thunder could feel his brother laughing at him from somewhere out of sight and out of reach. The monstrous humanoid in the forest below was proving to be far more than Thor had bargained for, but he was nowhere near ready to give in and accept defeat. Still, maybe this wasn't a fight worth having on Earth. All Thor's electrical attacks were doing was destroying trees, and the planet was already facing unprecedented levels of deforestation due to the greed of human CEOs and shady entrepreneurs. Thor certainly didn't want to be part of the problem, and now that it was occurring to him, he realized that he should probably try to do something about that once the situation with the Shy Guy was resolved. It didn't matter how close of a friend Elon Musk was to Tony Stark. These overreaching humans had to be given a stern talking to by the God of Thunder, with or without hammer in his hand. Of course, Thor's environmentalist concerns had to go on the back burner for now, since SCP-096 was advancing towards him once again, with no hint of slowing down.
Let's see if you can follow me back to Asgard, you son of an elf,
Thor thought. He held his hammer aloft and counted on Heimdall to deploy the Bifrost. The Rainbow Bridge arrived seconds before SCP-096's arms would have reached the Asgardian, and as expected, it instantly carried Thor into the interdimensional space between his destinations. Amidst the swirling sea of multicolored lights, Thor shared a laugh with nobody but himself and Mjolnir.
So much for Shy Guy,
said Thor.
Looks like it'll have to resolve those body issues on its own time. I've been through something similar, so I can relate. Best of luck, pitiful beast.
But while Thor was congratulating himself for his strategic retreat, he almost didn't notice that his foe hadn't actually stopped in its pursuit. As a matter of fact, SCP-096 was currently inside of the Bifrost and swiftly gaining on the God of Thunder. The Shy Guy was truly running in the 90s. Well, 90 miles per hour or more, but it made the same difference. The creature grabbed Thor by his ankles and screeched in mortified rage. Thor punched SCP-096 in the face, hoping to shake it off, but to no avail. The two opponents spun through the Bifrost, locked together in an unbreakable grapple, until they collided with the walls of interdimensional space. Thor knew exactly where this was going, and he wasn't happy about it. Like a sheet of ice composed of photons, the outer limits of the Bifrost broke away, sending both combatants shooting off into the void. Seconds later, a wormhole spit Thor and SCP-096 out in a vast junkyard filled with the remains of countless spaceships and alien life forms.
Great, I'm trapped in this garbage world again. I knew I should have picked somewhere closer.
Thor shook off the nauseating effects of the failed interdimensional trip. SCP-096 was already hale and hearty for another round. Thor grimaced with frustrated anticipation.
How about a quick 5-minute rest?
Thor implored the Shy Guy.
Gentlemen's truce?
SCP-096 roared and dashed forth, more crazed than ever. Thor exhaled in futility.
I thought not.
He whipped Mjolnir around and hurled it straight for SCP-096's skull. The reliable Urus steel hammer made contact, knocking the creature onto its back. At the very least, Thor could always count on his signature weapon to help him out. Or could he? When the Asgardian tried to call the hammer back, he was shocked to find that SCP-096 had somehow grabbed a hold of its handle. Even more surprisingly, it now appeared to be wielding the hammer as easily as Thor could.
Son of a… You're telling me that thing is worthy?
The Shy Guy, now with Mjolnir in hand, pounced on Thor, swinging the hammer with no technique or finesse. It was everything Thor could do to simply avoid the creature's range. A blow from Mjolnir was enough to cause serious injury to even the most formidable Asgardian warrior.
Damn you, Mjolnir, we talked about this,
Thor thundered.
We're friends, aren't we?
But none of his words could get through to the hammer now that it was in the hand of SCP-096. In an act of righteous defiance, Thor called the fury of lightning into his own body. This strange foe, which had come from Loki's latest prank, was about to find out what happened when a God of Thunder got serious. With the speed of a lightning bolt, Thor flew at SCP-096 and punched it so hard that its grip loosened on Mjolnir for all but a second, and that second was all Thor needed to reclaim his weapon. His hand clung tightly to Mjolnir's handle as he swung the weapon into the Shy Guy's body with all of his might. The shockwave of this forceful blow launched piles of debris high into the air and sent SCP-096 tumbling across the surface of the planet like a thrown piece of discarded food at an Asgardian feast. With another pulse of electricity, Thor magnetized the portions of the rubble which contained spaceship parts and used his manipulation of that same energy to bury the Shy Guy in the deepest heap of trash he could manage. And with one last flick of Mjolnir, Thor sent himself hurtling through the largest wormhole in the sky above and back into space where it would be far more difficult for his foe to follow him. Finally, with some distance, Thor breathed a sigh of relief.
You almost had me that time, Loki. What an unusual being. Fought like a berserker, but was somehow also pure of heart. A kindred spirit to myself, perhaps? Even so, I truly hope to never meet that thing again.
Now go check out SCP-096 vs. SCP-343 and SCP-049 cures SCP-096 of the pestilence for more battles with this self-conscious, skinny legend.